Hello, I'm Tom Gilson. I'm one of the leaders of the Apologetics Fellowship, which you will find online at apologeticsfellowship.org. We meet currently in the Cincinnati-Dayton area in Ohio, but we're open to helping you start a group in your area too if you're interested. Just use the contact form at apologeticsfellowship.org to find us. But I thought I'd share with you. I just came back home from our January meeting of the Apologetics Fellowship, and I thought it might be worth just telling you some of what went on there. We've done all kinds of different topics there, ranging from apologetics on the truth of the Gospels to talking about critical race theory to a visit by Zoom with Tim McGrew talking about different issues today, good and bad, in the world of apologetics. Well, today it was a discussion on the ministry of apologetics, not so much the questions or answers that we deal with so often in knowing whether the gospel is true, but how do you have a real ministry with apologetics, especially in the church? And this time it was my privilege to lead the discussion. I started off with some different kinds of questions. Not so much, just to look at it from a different direction. A lot of times we talk about what is apologetics for, or how should we do apologetics? Well, when I was in grad school studying what was actually called job analysis, one of the things that we learned was that you can discover the best way to do a job by going to people who know the job and asking them what's a bad way to do the job, what's the wrong way to do it, and that can lead you to some insights you don't get other ways. So I said, what is apologetics not for? And that was the opening question in our discussion. We meet for 2 hours every time we meet, and the discussion never fails to finish the time. That was the first of just 2 discussion starter questions that I needed to ask. And we went on with that for a full hour of our time together. The second question was, well, actually, the first one had some follow-ups. What is apologetics not for? Followed up by a question which was, what new insights does that give us on what apologetics is for? And then I asked another negative question with positive intention that was more church related. What are some ways that people get apologetics wrong in the church? And my goodness, I wish I could replay the discussion for you, and you can do it in the comments if you like. But there are all kinds of ways we can do apologetics wrong in the church, and we had fun with that, talking about people who are overly proud, overly pushy, overly geeky, overly whatever, people who just barge in and try to take over, people who don't understand how to work with people, and all kinds of things. One of the interesting things that came out was that apologetics is actually kind of a dangerous ministry if you think about it, because think about it from the perspective of the pastor. If you're letting someone teach apologetics, you're letting them teach doctrine and reasons and reasoning that's kind of unfamiliar to the people in the church. A couple things could go wrong. The pastor has to be confident that you're teaching the truth, for one thing. We do not want apologetics teaching heresy or just any kind of wrong beliefs that are non-standard even, I guess. I'm failing to find the word right now, but another way apologetics can be dangerous is, for those of you who know apologetics, often we use analytical step-by-step arguments going from A to B to C to D and so on. And you don't get D correctly unless you got A, B, and C correctly. Well, sometimes we can be teaching analytically that way, and someone will kind of get B wrong, or they'll misunderstand what we meant by C, and they'll take us. We thought we were going this way with it, and they'll go, well, I thought you. And they're going this way, and they'll tell the rest of the church we're teaching this other thing way off on the side when we really weren't. It was just because they didn't catch the flow of the logic. It's really not very unlikely in apologetics ministry when we begin in a church. It's really not unlikely that we'll be misunderstood. That's just not necessarily something we're doing wrong, but we have to be careful in how we communicate, because it's the communicator's role to make sure, to the extent possible, to make sure that what they're teaching is the same thing the listeners are hearing. Or in other words, that the communication is making it successfully from the teacher to the learner. Can't always be sure that will work. It's not entirely within our reach to be able to accomplish that, but that should be our attention anyway, our intention. I went from there. That was a full hour of talk. And then, sometimes, or actually, typically, we'll start with a 10 to 20 minute discussion starter talk by one of our leaders and let that kick off the discussion. This time I did it different. We started with a couple of discussion questions, and then I went into teaching mode to talk about four keys to successful ministry with apologetics in the church. And I told the group there, I had a little fun with this, I told them that in order to make it memorable, I was going to alliterate all of these four keys, and they were all going to start with the letter R. The first one is relationships, I said. The second one is relationships. The third is relationships, and the fourth is relationships. And I think they forgave me for this, because then I said, oh my goodness, I just realized this isn't just alliteration. These words rhyme too. Like, I was all proud of myself for it. They laughed. But relationships. Apologetics isn't just about knowing answers. Ministry is about relationships. That was the first point under relationships that we talked about as I unpacked that. And the second point was that relationships take time. There I shared my secret answer to almost every hard question in ministry. People will ask me, how do you teach someone the truth about homosexuality? How do you help them come to understand that a certain error is what it is, that it's wrong? And I have a stock answer that is almost always true. And that answer is slowly. The way you do it is slowly. You do it relationally. You do it with people, not as projects, not as logical targets to beat up or to just treat as targets for persuasion. You treat people as people. And and I'll come back to the kind of the summary point of this in a moment. It was something I could have said earlier. This is what you get in an ad lib video, but this is what I'm doing for today. Third point under relationships, I said this goes without saying, but it would be wrong not to say it, which is the centrality of our relationship with God through Jesus Christ. That Acts 1:8 tells us that our power for witness comes when the Holy Spirit is giving us that power. And finally, the fourth point, and this wasn't just teaching. This is always interactive. We have a great time there together. I tell you, these are people who love discussing these things. But the fourth point was that since apologetics ministry is teaching ministry, and it's authoritative teaching ministry, it's really a leadership ministry. And for that reason, just strategically, apologists who want to have a ministry in their church, we should really build our relationship in and among the leadership team of the church, that we become a part of that leadership team. The way you do that, the answer there might be slowly. The way you do it is relationally. The pastor in particular, the senior pastor, has to know who you are. He should, by virtue of his position in the church, and the other leaders as well, they should make every effort to be assured that you are qualified as a teacher if you're going to be an apologist. If you should be qualified as a leader, they need to know you well enough to be sure of that. And you need to show enough interest in the ministries of the church and be willing enough to come under the leadership of the church that they know that you are there to serve the church. That was really the one overall summary word that covers almost everything else that we talked about this morning. It's service. We looked at a couple of verses just representative of service. And one of them was 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8. The other one was from Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. In 2 Corinthians 9, verse 8, it talks about having in all sufficiency being provided to us for every good work. In Genesis 12:3, God tells Abraham that he is blessed so that he can be a blessing, that he would be a blessing to all nations. What's in common, what those two verses have in common, you can find all over the Bible, really. It's not just those two locations. It's that when God gives us some kind of a gift, any kind of a gift or a blessing, he means us to use it for the good of others. Apologetics is for the sake of others. If I had one answer to the question, what is apologetics for? It's a vague answer. It's a non-specific answer. It's an answer that could apply to every ministry, but it has to apply to apologetics ministry. It's that apologetics is for service, for love, for giving to others, for being self-sacrificially loving. And it has to be a ministry to others, because the kinds of things that we do in apologetics are for the building up of faith and for the effective evangelism of the lost. Well, here I am. This is actually kind of backwards, upside down. I'm one person in my home talking to you about a fellowship. We didn't record the meeting. We didn't video it. We didn't have audio recorders going. It wouldn't work in the room we were in, just technically wouldn't work. But I want you to picture that happening in a lively, interactive discussion. We had a small group, probably due to cold weather here in Ohio today, only 15 people or so, but a lively, interactive discussion, and then going away with thoughts in our mind about how can I help reach my church? How can I help serve my church? How can I help other churches? How can I find other people who are interested in apologetics and help them connect with us so that together we can learn to be more effective in knowing the truth, knowing reasons for the truth, and knowing how to have a ministry in the lives of other people through our churches with these reasons and these defenses for the truth. Again, I invite you to come to apologeticsfellowship.org. The website is still somewhat under construction for lots of reasons, but it's growing, and you can click on the events tab and you'll find upcoming events that we are either hosting or letting people know about in our area. And if you want to check into possibly starting an apologetics fellowship where you are, use the contact form you'll find there and get in touch with me. I'm Tom Gilson, and love to have you join us.